Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Ted's carefully constructed life is beginning to unravel in ways he never expected. On the surface, Ted has the charm, the influence, and the calculated sense of timing that make people trust him almost too easily. Leslie, grieving but financially secure from the inheritance left by Barbara, seems like the perfect mark for a man who is always weighing costs against opportunities. Ted presents himself as the wronged husband, trapped in a failing marriage with Nicole, but secretly, his mind is a machine turning over numbers, assets, and leverage. To Ted, love is never as binding as a contract, and promises mean nothing compared to control. When he tells Leslie that he is divorcing Nicole and planning to move in with her, it is less of a declaration of passion and more of a strategy session. Leslie, blinded by her own longing for companionship, never stops to question the inconsistencies in Ted's story. What makes Ted so dangerous is not just his deceit, but his adaptability. When he recognizes that actually divorcing Nicole would strip him of everything: his financial standing, his connection to the Dupree family, and his foothold in the world he has clawed his way into, he pivots. He understands that Leslie's inheritance can provide him with a different kind of cushion, one not tied to Nicole's volatile loyalties or the rigid structure of the Dupree dynasty. If Leslie can be convinced, manipulated, or even broken down to surrender her trust, then Ted gains leverage without surrendering his existing marriage. The plan grows in silence, nurtured in the shadows of his mind, while his words to Leslie are coated in warmth and promises he will never intend to keep. At the same time, Eva, Ted's daughter, navigates her own conflicting desires. She does not want Leslie to interfere in what she perceives as her father's fragile but still salvageable marriage to Nicole. To Eva, Leslie represents chaos, an outsider who threatens to tilt the careful balance of loyalty and resentment that defines the Dupree family. Yet deep down, Eva harbors a longing she can hardly admit to herself: the idea of a family unit where Ted, Leslie, and herself coexist without hostility. That vision may be an illusion, but it whispers to her in lonely hours, a dream of stability that always seems to vanish when the real games begin. Eva turns to Thomas for help, a man who has always been closer to Kat but who shares an understanding of how power and money intersect. Thomas has the connections and the resourcefulness to disrupt Leslie's flow of inheritance, at least temporarily. The trust fund, established by Anita with intentions of security and fairness, has become a weapon in family power struggles. Eva's request places Thomas in a delicate position, but the allure of undermining Leslie and supporting Eva makes him take risks he otherwise might avoid. If they succeed, Leslie will be forced to delay repairs on the crimson-colored house she clings to as a symbol of independence. That house, to Leslie, is not just property, it is memory, history, and a statement that she cannot be erased. Ted knows this, and he twists it to his advantage, leveraging her desperation for stability to make his own promises appear genuine. Ted even goes so far as to provide proof of his supposed commitment. He arranges the transfer of property documents, signing over the title of the house to Leslie and Eva as though this were a gesture of trust. Leslie reads this as love, as loyalty reborn in a man she wants to believe has chosen her above all others. Eva sees it differently. For her, the documents are not proof of affection but of control, an elaborate sleight of hand that keeps both Leslie and herself tethered to Ted's will. Ted smiles, but in his private thoughts, the Dupree family remains his anchor. No matter how turbulent things become with Leslie, he knows his ultimate survival lies in maintaining his role within that dynasty. The problem is that belonging to the Dupree family is not a matter of money alone. Even Bill, a defense attorney with talent and resilience, struggles to carve out recognition among them. Bill's years of effort yield nothing but suspicion and distance, his competence never enough to bridge the invisible walls of bloodlines and silent judgment. His longing for acceptance festers until Haley enters the picture, offering him the attention and validation that Danny, his wife, had long grown too weary to provide. Bill's affair, followed by his divorce, is a ripple effect of what happens when outsiders orbit too close to the gravitational pull of the Duprees. Ted is aware of this. He knows that survival in the family demands more than strategy, it requires sacrifice, patience, and sometimes betrayal. In quiet moments with Eva, Ted admits his frustrations. He insists that Leslie cannot be allowed to jeopardize his marriage to Nicole, even if he has toyed with the idea of moving in with her. What bothers him most is not Leslie's longing but her persistence. She has already begun to provoke Nicole, threatening to reveal things Ted thought were buried, and once Nicole is angered, the household begins to crack under the strain. For Ted, the tension is intolerable. He needs Leslie's inheritance, but he also needs Nicole's standing. To lose one is to lose leverage. To lose both would be ruin. Eva, sensing her father's desperation, reassures him that she will act where she can. She promises to manage Leslie's interference as long as the situation remains within her control. To Eva, it is more than loyalty, it is a chance to prove her usefulness to her father, to show that she can be a player in the family's tangled web rather than a pawn. Thomas supports her efforts, helping to pull strings with the trust fund and choking off Leslie's resources. Leslie, unaware of the full scale of the betrayal forming around her, grows frustrated as delays mount, her plans to restore the Crimson House falling further into disarray. What makes Leslie dangerous, however, is not her wealth but her temper. Ted learns this firsthand when Leslie, pushed to her limits, lashes out at Nicole, revealing their secret plans of living together. The words land like a blade. Nicole, furious and humiliated, begins to reassess her marriage not as a union but as a battlefield. Suddenly, Ted's maneuvering seems less like a clever balancing act and more like a house of cards ready to collapse. The one thing Ted cannot tolerate is exposure, and Leslie has just made him visible in the worst way possible. The days that follow are marked by tension, suspicion, and escalating conflict. Nicole confronts Ted in quiet but cutting arguments, demanding explanations he can only half deliver. Leslie, emboldened by her disclosure, begins pressing harder for Ted to take decisive action. Eva, torn between shielding her father and curbing Leslie's growing boldness, finds herself stretched thin, her alliances more fragile than she cares to admit. Thomas warns her that every move they make against Leslie risks backlash, but Eva refuses to stand down. She believes that if she can silence Leslie long enough, her father will see her as indispensable, the one child who preserved his standing when the walls closed in. Ted continues to manipulate, soothing Leslie with empty reassurances while telling Nicole half-truths that keep her anger simmering without boiling over. It is a dangerous balance, one that even Ted knows cannot last forever. Still, he cannot resist playing both sides, convinced that his intelligence will always allow him to stay one step ahead. But the truth is that the pieces are already slipping beyond his control. In the Dupree estate, whispers begin to circulate. Family members who had once ignored Ted's ambitions now eye him with suspicion. They sense the fractures in his household, the rumors of inheritance schemes and betrayals that echo through hallways too accustomed to secrets. Bill, still reeling from his own exile through divorce, watches from the margins with a bitterness that makes him dangerous. Haley whispers into his ear, planting doubts, fueling his sense of grievance, and hinting that Ted's downfall might be an opportunity for others to rise. Meanwhile, Leslie struggles with the loss of her financial stability, growing desperate as bills pile up and the Crimson House becomes more of a burden than a symbol. She turns to Ted for comfort, believing in the promises he continues to make, but her anger simmers beneath the surface. She cannot forgive Nicole's scorn, nor Eva's coldness, and though she does not yet realize it, her actions are pushing Ted further into corners where even his cunning cannot save him. The stage is set for a collapse, though no one can yet predict the exact form it will take. Every player, Ted, Leslie, Nicole, Eva, Thomas, Bill, moves according to desires that are increasingly incompatible, their alliances built on shifting sands. And as the days darken, the question becomes not whether the truth will emerge, but who will wield it first and how deep the cuts will go when it does. The aftermath of Leslie's disclosure to Nicole leaves a raw wound in every relationship tied to Ted. Nicole becomes colder, her eyes sharp with suspicion every time she looks at her husband. Once, Ted could manipulate her with charm, twisting truth into something almost believable, but now she listens with silence that feels heavier than accusation. Nicole is not simply a woman betrayed, she is a Dupree, and that name carries an instinct for survival and retaliation. But her restraint. She does not yell, she does not leave. She waits, and in her silence, Ted feels the noose tightening. Leslie, meanwhile, is caught in her own spiral. The trust fund payments that once gave her comfort have slowed to a trickle. Thomas's interference quietly bleeding her resources dry. Her Crimson House, the structure she has always seen as a monument to her independence, stands increasingly hollow. Repairs stall, rooms close off, and what once shined with pride now looks like a decaying shell. Yet Leslie clings to Ted as though he is the last lifeline she has left. Each time he reassures her that they will be together, she chooses to believe, ignoring the inconsistencies and the evasions. Love, for Leslie, is not rational, it is survival. Eva grows sharper in this climate of decay. Her promise to her father becomes an obsession, and she begins to believe that her role is no longer simply to protect but to control. She presses Thomas harder, demanding not only that Leslie's inheritance remain blocked but that whispers of financial irresponsibility circulate quietly through the family. If Leslie can be painted as unstable, unreliable, a woman who squanders gifts, then even her supporters in the shadows of the Dupree estate will abandon her. Thomas hesitates, but Eva's determination pulls him along. He sees the dangerous fire in her eyes, the reflection of Ted's cunning but with a ruthlessness that lacks his restraint. Bill's fall from the family remains a cautionary tale for everyone. His affair with Haley cost him his marriage to Danny, and though Haley offers him comfort, it is not enough to heal the wound of rejection from the Duprees. Bitterness hardens into resolve, and he begins to look outward, watching the unraveling threads of Ted's household with interest. Bill, once desperate for recognition, now sees opportunity in destruction. If Ted collapses, perhaps the balance of power within the family will shift. With Haley whispering at his side, his anger sharpens into strategy. The tension between Nicole and Leslie grows unbearable. Each woman knows that the other holds a kind of power over Ted, and neither is willing to yield. When Leslie confronts Nicole again, this time in a calculated moment during a family gathering, the confrontation nearly tears the room apart. Words fly, accusations spill, and though Ted rushes to mediate, it is clear to everyone present that his double life has been exposed. What once was whispered becomes undeniable. The Duprees, who value control above all else, do not forgive such recklessness. Ted begins to see his empire crumbling. Nicole withdraws further, her alliances within the family strengthening as she distances herself from him. Leslie becomes unpredictable, her desperation making her reckless. Eva grows consumed with her schemes, acting in ways that even Ted finds alarming. He realizes that the very tools he has used, manipulation, secrecy, leverage, are now being wielded by those around him, often against him. The master of the game has become one of its pieces. Leslie's anger erupts when she learns that her inheritance has been tampered with. At first, she blames bureaucracy, then bad luck, but as the truth begins to surface, she connects the threads back to Eva and Thomas. The betrayal cuts deep, and Leslie begins to fight back. She threatens legal action, exposing the schemes around the trust fund, and in doing so, she inadvertently forces the Dupree family into a position they despise: visibility. For years, their wealth has been protected by silence, but Leslie's desperation drags everything into the light. Eva responds with a cold precision that shocks even Ted. She confronts Leslie directly, warning her that pushing further will not end well. It is in this moment that the illusion of a possible family, Ted, Eva, and Leslie together, is finally shattered. Leslie sees in Eva's eyes the same manipulation that Ted once cloaked in charm, but now stripped of pretense. The realization that both father and daughter have used her not as family but as leverage leaves Leslie devastated. Nicole seizes this moment. She makes her move with the Dupree family's backing, demanding accountability from Ted. Divorce is no longer simply a threat, it becomes a weapon, one sharpened with the promise of cutting him out entirely. Ted fights, but the tide is against him. Even his promises to Leslie cannot be fulfilled now, as he clings desperately to what remains of his connection to Nicole and the family's fortune. Bill, standing on the outside, watches as Ted falters. With Haley urging him forward, he begins to weave himself back into the periphery of the family, not as a loyal son-in-law but as an informant, a critic, a voice of dissent that others begin to heed. In Ted's weakness, Bill finds strength. What he once begged for acceptance now transforms into something darker, revenge dressed as redemption. The Crimson House becomes the battleground for the final unraveling. Leslie, unwilling to surrender, clings to it even as repairs remain unfinished and debts grow heavier. Ted promises to help, but his words ring hollow. Eva and Thomas work to ensure Leslie cannot reclaim her footing, but the harder they push, the more unpredictable Leslie becomes. In one desperate attempt to prove her stability, Leslie invites the Duprees to see the house, showcasing it as though it were whole. Instead, the gathering becomes a scene of humiliation. The peeling paint, the unfinished rooms, the cracks in the walls, each becomes a metaphor for Leslie herself, a woman collapsing under the weight of her choices. It is here that Nicole delivers her final strike. With the family gathered, she announces her separation from Ted, framing him not only as unfaithful but as reckless with the family's reputation. The words echo in the halls of the Crimson House, each syllable a nail in Ted's coffin. He stands stunned, realizing that every angle he once controlled has been closed off. Leslie has turned against him, Eva has overstepped, Nicole has declared war, and even Bill has begun to rise from the ashes of his disgrace. Ted, the man who once believed he could balance everything, marriage, inheritance, family loyalty, finds himself standing alone. His empire has been revealed for what it always was: fragile, unstable, and doomed by his own arrogance. The Duprees, ruthless in their silence, move on without him, and what remains is not the vision of family he once crafted, but the ruins of ambition that consumed them all. The fallout spreads like wildfire after Nicole's public declaration. In the days following, Ted becomes a ghost in his own home. Rooms that once felt like safe holds now feel like prison cells, every corner whispering of betrayal. Nicole refuses to speak to him beyond cold, clipped sentences, and Leslie has all but vanished from his life, retreating into the wreckage of the Crimson House. Ted begins to realize that his greatest enemy is not a single person, but time itself. Every day that passes, he loses more ground, more allies, and more control. Eva notices this decline with growing unease. For all her maneuvering, her schemes were always tied to the assumption that her father would remain strong enough to carry the weight of consequence. But now, Ted looks fragile, his confidence cracked, and for the first time, Eva wonders if she has gambled too heavily. She presses Thomas for reassurance, but even he warns her that attaching herself too tightly to her father's sinking ship could drag her down as well. Yet Eva resists. Her loyalty is not rooted in logic but in a desperate need for recognition. She refuses to let her father collapse without a fight. Leslie, in contrast, finds herself at a crossroads. Her anger at Ted simmers, but it is matched by her grief for what she lost, not just money or stability, but the illusion of belonging. The Crimson House looms over her like a cruel reminder, its unfinished rooms echoing with silence. She tries to salvage dignity by telling herself she does not need Ted or Eva, but at night, when the wind rattles the old windows, she admits the truth: she has never felt so alone. That loneliness drives her to reckless decisions. She contacts lawyers about her inheritance, threatens to expose conversations, and even contemplates selling pieces of the house to buy herself time. Each act is less about survival and more about striking back at those who cut her adrift. Meanwhile, Nicole moves decisively. Her separation from Ted is not simply personal, it is strategic. With the Dupree family's backing, she begins legal proceedings that would strip Ted of any meaningful claim to their assets. What makes Nicole dangerous is not rage, but clarity. She no longer hides behind the guise of reconciliation. She has chosen war. To the family, she presents herself as a woman wronged but still dignified, a wife who endured betrayal yet emerged stronger. Her position strengthens with every whisper she shares, every detail of Ted's duplicity laid bare. Bill senses his opening. Watching from the sidelines, he recognizes that chaos can be turned into currency. With Haley at his side, he approaches Nicole subtly, framing himself as an ally in her battle against Ted. His words are careful, rehearsed, and designed to remind Nicole that while he may have failed with Danny, he still understands the cost of betrayal. In Bill, Nicole sees a useful tool, someone who can voice the family's grievances without staining her own hands. For the first time since his disgrace, Bill feels himself edging back into relevance. The story converges in one final gathering at the Crimson House, orchestrated not by Ted or Nicole, but by Leslie. Against all advice, she invites them all: Ted, Eva, Nicole, even Bill and Haley. Her purpose is unclear, veiled in vague promises of reconciliation and closure, but the invitation itself feels like a dare. The Crimson House, unfinished and fragile, becomes the stage for one last confrontation. When they arrive, the tension is suffocating. The house groans under the weight of too many secrets, its walls unfinished, its hallways filled with shadows. Leslie greets them with a brittle smile, her voice carrying the edge of both desperation and defiance. She claims she wants to end the conflict, but beneath her words lies an undercurrent of accusation. She speaks of the inheritance, of manipulation, of betrayals that cut across every bond in the room. Her words are not conciliatory, they are confrontational, each sentence peeling back the facade of civility the Duprees so carefully guard. Ted tries to interrupt, to steer the gathering back into control, but his voice carries no authority anymore. Nicole silences him with a look, her presence commanding even without words. Eva clings to his side, but even she begins to see the futility. For all her plotting, she cannot restore the respect her father has squandered. Thomas watches quietly from the corner, his face unreadable, calculating the moment to step in if Eva falters. The confrontation peaks when Leslie directly accuses Eva of conspiring with Thomas to block her inheritance. For a moment, the room freezes. Eva, usually sharp and poised, stumbles under the weight of the accusation. She tries to deny it, but her hesitation is enough. Ted looks at her with something close to shock, realizing that his daughter's schemes, meant to protect him, may have instead lit the fuse of his downfall. Nicole seizes on the moment, her voice cutting through the tension. This family destroys everything it touches. And now, even itself. The room descends into chaos. Leslie demands restitution, Eva defends herself with venom, Nicole calls for finality, and Dance, the orchestrator of every scheme, finds himself silent, drowning in the noise. Bill, ever the opportunist, steps forward with a calmness that contrasts the storm, offering his services to help untangle the legal mess. His words drip with irony, as everyone in the room knows his true intent is not service, but survival. The gathering ends not with resolution, but with fracture. Nicole leaves first, her decision made. She will finalize the divorce, strip Ted of every advantage, and sever him from the Dupree fortune. Leslie collapses into a chair, realizing too late that her attempt at regaining control has only left her more isolated. Eva storms out, dragging Thomas with her, her anger at being exposed fueling new and dangerous ambitions. Bill lingers, exchanging a look with Haley that confirms what they both know: the Dupree dynasty has entered a new era of conflict, and they intend to carve their place within it. Ted is left alone in the Crimson House, surrounded by unfinished walls and echoes of promises he never kept. The weight of his schemes, his betrayals, and his arrogance crashes down upon him. For the first time, he has no plan, no strategy, no path forward. The man who once believed he could manipulate everyone now realizes that he has been outmaneuvered by them all. The Crimson House, once a symbol of opportunity, becomes his prison, a reminder that ambition without loyalty, and control without love, will always end in ruin. And as night falls, the house groans again, its walls whispering not of the family he sought to build, but of the one he has lost forever.